George, this is absolutely incredible because we had a great roster of talent last year, but we have the two best ever here today. Yourself and Anderson Silva. What's it like being in the same room as him? Because you guys were the poster boys of the UFC for so long. It must be incredible.
Well, just to be here with all the guys, Silva, Matthews, Matt Serra, Chuck Liddell, you know, the Rampage. There's so many legends here. For me, it's I just feel very lucky and privileged to be among these guys, you know?
Yeah, I mean, these are times when, you know, you reflect on everything that's happened, how you got to where you are today. And you had a tough time growing up, didn't you? You had a tough time with bullies growing up, and that was one of the things that sort of motivated you to go into combat sports. Can you talk about that experience and that point of your life?
Yeah, for people who don't know, I start martial art first as a self-defense because I was victim of bullying at school. So I start as a self-defense, and I start the academy where I was training quickly become the place where I felt the best because I was starting to collect medals. So I start as a self-defense, it transformed into a passion, and later on that's how I made a living. So yeah, really martial arts changes my life.
I mean, one particular person that gave you a hard time in school, I know you've told this story, but you actually encountered him later on in life when you was a UFC champion. What was that experience like? Because that must have been humbling from your sense, and it must have been, it must have gave you a great sense of, wow, I overcame something that was difficult in my life. Because that can be a demon for a lot of people. They can never get over the high school bully.
I never hold any grudge against the guys who bullied me when I was young. You know, yeah, when I was young, it was very frustrating for me. But I realized down the road, what doesn't kill you make you stronger. And I know for a fact that these guys who bullied me were bullied by other people themselves. So I was just a collateral damage, so to speak. So, and I know for a fact that being a victim of bullying when I was young helped me later on in my career in mixed martial art, because we as a mixed martial art fighter, it's a very egotistic industry, and a lot of it has to do with mental warfare, and a lot of fighters try to bully each other. So because I was bullied when I was a kid, it made me stronger, and it prepares me for what I needed to face in my mixed martial art career.
I mean, sitting with you now, one of the greatest fighters to ever live, was that always your ambition once it turned into, you know, self-defense into a career choice? As soon as it became a career choice, was you like, I'm not just going to be here to take part, maybe win a world title and be happy with that. I want to go down as one of the greatest fighters to walk the face of the earth?
Well, there's three things that I wanted to do in my career. There's three goals that I have. First, I wanted to be the best. I wanted to be champion. Second, I wanted to do things that changes the sport. I started to wear a suit early on in my career, and at the time the sport was not respected as a legitimate sport back then. It was more like people used to call it in America human cockfighting. You know what I mean? It was like very barbaric. So we had to fight for the legitimacy of our sport as well. So I started wearing a suit. I wanted to change the image of the sport. I wanted to also implement drug testing. That was a big problem in our sport. So one of my goals also was to try to change the sport, and I did the best I can to do it. And another thing that I wanted to do is to retire on top. I wanted to retire from the sport and not the sport retiring me. Because for me, health is the most important and precious gift that you have.
You know, you mentioned what the UFC and MMA was previously perceived as, human cockfighting. You know, guys used to wear judo gis and bare knuckle, used to have like a lightweight versus a light heavyweight. How do you think you would have fared in that? And would that ever have interested you if you was a few years older, you'd have got into it maybe 10 years before you actually did? Would you have ever been interested in that side?
The thing is, the sport has changed a lot over the years. And when I used to compete at first, people used to wear tank top in press conference, which is okay, but we wanted to, as mixed martial art fighter, we wanted to be considered as real athlete, legitimate athlete. So if we want to be considered as real athlete, I always thought that we need to start acting like one. If you look at football players, they have a dress code during press conference. They wear a suit, ties. And I think it was important to change that perception of what people has of us. We're not street fighters, we're professional fighters. So that's what we do, is we do it because we're professional at it. So we need to act like professional. And that's why I try to change the image of the sport.
I think it was around 2002 you made your professional debut. Now, do you remember what that feeling was like? Entrance music playing, if you did have any entrance music at that time, you're walking to the cage. What you were feeling when you were looking at your gloves, looking at the opponent standing across the octagon, and how scared were you? Because I was just speaking to young Mohammed Makayev then. Every athlete is scared before competing, especially in mixed martial arts.
I was always scared. Fighting was the part that I hated the most. I never liked to fight. People sometimes ask me, if you don't like to fight, why did you choose that path of life? Well, fighting is the thing I hated the most about my work. But I love the freedom that it gives me. I love the sport. I love to train in the gym. I love the science of the game. I love we make good living out of it. I love the confidence that it gives me. I love the fact that it makes me healthy. It forces you to have a healthy lifestyle. Of course, not good to get hit on the head, but if you have a healthy lifestyle, that's the advantage of it. So, in my field of work, there's no perfect work. But I feel like I loved everything about being an MMA fighter except the fighting part. Because for me, fighting, it's very scary. I never like not knowing before a fight if I was going to be badly hurt, humiliated, or winning the ultimate prize. So the worst part about it is the waiting part before a fight. It's so stressful, but when you taste victory, there's really nothing like it. There's no feeling like it. So all that suffering and sacrifice, it's worth it at the end when you win.
100%, and you had a hell of a career as well. And the beautiful thing about MMA is that it's not like boxing. Anyone on any given day can defeat anybody. And we did see that in your career as well. You suffered 2 losses against Matt Serra and Matt Hughes, who are here today, but you also went back and rectified those and won those. You won the trilogy over Matt Hughes and you beat Matt Serra in the rematch as well. So after those fights, let's say the Matt Hughes fight, for example, the first one, you really wanted UFC gold. He was your idol at the time. You mentioned that. You mentioned that you were looking at him as your hero a bit too much. You had too much respect for him. How did you overcome a loss? What were those months like afterwards?
Well, like you mentioned, I had 2 losses in my career, and these 2 losses was the thing that teach me the most about my career. You know, a lot of guys, when they lose, they have a failure, they crumble. Or some, they don't crumble, but they rise. These 2 losses made me a much better fighter. Because when you lose, you need to analyze the reason why you lose. And once you identify those reasons, you need to make sure you don't ever do the same mistake again. So that means you might, that doesn't mean you're never ever gonna lose again, but it means that if you don't repeat those mistakes, you'll never lose for the same mistake again. Therefore, it makes you a better version of what you were. So I always try to see my career as a marathon, not as a sprint. It's not one fight that defines you. It's your career, your entire career, and it's all. And that's why I believe these losses were the best thing that ever happened to me.
I mean, after the Matt Serra win, you went on a run that is rarely seen in combat sports. You had that undefeatable aura about you. Fighters looked like sometimes they were defeated before they got in the octagon with you because you had such a undefeatable aura around you. Could you see that in their eyes? Could you see that fighters were like, oh my God, I'm standing across from the greatest combat sports athlete in the world right now?
Well, you never know before a fight what the outcome will be. And that's not what you need to focus on. If you want to be successful in fighting, you need to focus on the objective, the things that you need to do to win, the things that it's in your control. That's how you overcome fear. If you focus on things that are not in your control, for example, am I gonna win or lose? What people gonna think about me? What my opponent is doing? These things you don't control it, so you don't want to lose your time and energy focusing on that. You want to focus only on the things that you do have control on. And if you do that, the outcome will take care of itself. There is nobody who is invincible. There is nobody invincible. Everybody can lose. But the thing that you can do to slope the odds in your favor is to be objective and focus on the thing that you do have control and try to make the best out of it.
You mentioned verbal warfare before being a key aspect of combat sports now. Now more than ever, you know, when we've seen the rise of Conor McGregor, got guys like Colby Covington, they say some deep things now ripping into people. With you, few people did it, but one guy that did do it quite a lot was Nick Diaz. Now, I actually was watching a video on the way here before it popped up on my Twitter of around that time when you'd had surgery, and the first thing that you said when you woke up from the surgery was, I'm going to beat Nick Diaz. Where's Nick Diaz? And your friend with you was laughing like, the first thing he said when he woke up, he's asking about Nick Diaz. And you were saying, I hate that guy. I hate him so much for what he said, all that sort of stuff. Would that be true? Were you struggling with the mental warfare in that sense, struggling to keep your cool because you're so stone cold, ice cold, you've always let things slide. Was that a difficult time pre that fight?
Well, I don't hate nobody. For me, it was only business. But I believe that if you want to be the best at something, you need to be not only to work hard and dedicate time into it, you need to be obsessed about it. And when I was in the middle of my career, because I wanted to be the best, I became obsessive about that idea of becoming the best. So everything that I was doing was focused on trying to make me the best that I can be, the best version that Georges St Pierre can be as a fighter. I was thinking about it all the time when I was eating, driving my car, training, before going to bed, when I wake up in the morning. And after my surgery, Nick Diaz was the man to beat. He was my number one contender. So when I woke up, the first thing that came to my mind, I was like, I want to beat Nick Diaz. Not for personal reason, because I know that what I needed to do in order to be the best.
I mean, obsessiveness is a key trait in all successful people.
Yes.
If you want to be the best, the greatest, you do have that obsessive style of thinking. So when you decided to retire after the Johnny Hendricks fight, it was incredible that you came back and won the belt from Bisping at middleweight, a weight above. What was that experience like? It was 4 years, wasn't it, in between the head? So it was a long time.
Yes.
I'm guessing you were driving yourself a bit crazy because you're not having your love to channel that obsession with. What was that experience like?
When I took some time off at the end of my career, it was for mental purpose. I was competing for too long. I felt like I was carrying a lot of weight, and I start feeling claustrophobic. And I did not want to admit it at the time because I was a little bit ashamed of, but I was going through a depression. And I didn't want to talk about it because I was ashamed, because I thought that people would start saying about me like, oh, what is he complaining about? He's got money, he's popular, he has no reason to complain. But I was going through a lot of personal issues. And on top of that, I was fighting with the UFC against a performance-enhancing drug, and they didn't get my back. I had a bunch of problems, and I felt like I dedicate so much of my life into fighting that I did not have enough time for myself. So taking some time off was the best thing that I did in order to allow me to come back stronger. They always say an healthy body into an healthy mind, and it's true. You cannot be physically healthy if you're not healthy inside. So both works together, and it's very important for an athlete. If you want to be successful, you need to be healthy physically, but healthy up here. And I'm glad I took that time off because it allowed me to have some freedom to go around the world. I love paleontology, so I was able to go on site on dinosaur digs and stuff like that. I took time for myself, and that's what allowed me to come back stronger against Bisping.
It's amazing that you recognize that you needed that time off, because some fighters don't acknowledge that. They try to hide it, and then it shows in the octagon, doesn't it? It shows when they're competing. What would you say was the sweeter victory? Coming back from that depression, that tough time when you was out to go and win the middleweight bout against Michael Bisping, or the first UFC title that you won?
Well, every wins are different, but there's three that really stood out. My first win against Matt Hughes, when I won the title, for me was amazing because it was my first win ever in terms of my first title win. That was one of the most memorable time of my career. Also, my win against Matt Serra in Montreal, because I was the first time I was fighting in the UFC in front of my family in Montreal. So that was, for me, an amazing memory. And also my return when I fought at the Madison Square Garden against Michael Bisping, because it was, New York is a little bit like my second home. So, and it was, these three victories were without a doubt the most memorable victories of my career.
And obviously Anderson's here, like we've mentioned. That was the fight everyone wanted to see. Did you have a game plan in your mind of how to beat him? Because he had that unbeatable aura about him, just like you did. Did you ever envision when you were watching fight and thinking, I'm going to do this way, this would definitely work against him?
Well, there's always a game plan that go on before every fight. But it is very easy to make a game plan, but it's very hard to execute it, the game plan. So it's like some fans when they watch a fight, oh, why the guy doesn't do this? Why he should have done that? It's very easy, and I'm the same way. When I watch a fight, I critics sometimes, oh, he should do this, he should do that. But I know very well that once you're in the octagon, it's very hard. And that's why Anderson was so good. He was fighting like he was in the Matrix. It was just, he's got the best highlight reels of the UFC. So what he did was just amazing. And sometimes he did stuff that did make it look easy, but people have no idea how hard it is. The timing, the work that you need to put into to be able to realize those performances is just incredible.
And I know you won't like me asking this because you're a very humble guy, but I asked Mohammed this question as well. Who would you say are the top 5 greatest fighters of all time? And you know, you have to put yourself on it.
The top 5 of all time, I mean, I would say Anderson Silva, for sure. Royce Gracie, I believe. I would say Mark Coleman. really. I think you could say John Jones and Demetrius Johnson, I think. I mean, and you could say also Conor McGregor in a way to promote. He was for me, maybe not as the best fighter, but the best promoter because he brought the sport to a different level. He was the most popular. He's the most popular fighter that ever fought in mixed martial arts. So for that, I think we need to put him there as well.
We've seen Anderson boxing as well. He's boxed the likes of Tito Ortiz, Jake Paul. Would you ever get back in, compete, maybe go over into boxing? You know, we could actually see, I'm putting this to you guys as well, who would like to see GSP box Anderson Silva? We want to see it?
I had a fight presented to me a few years back against Oscar de la Hoya, but it did not materialize. Sometimes politics get in the way. I'm a performer. I'm an athlete. Sometimes when fight does not happen, it's because what happened in behind closed door in between manager. You know, and the business deal doesn't happen because of contracts and requests and things. I don't know if I will ever compete in boxing. To tell you the truth, I took my retirement and I made peace with it. And sometimes, like every other athlete, I watch fights and I'm like, it gives me good goosebumps. I'm like, man, I feel like I want to go back in there. Or when I train in the gym, I still got it, you know? And it makes me feel sometimes like I want to go back in there. But once after my training, when I go back home, I'm like, I'm done with it. You know what I mean? So I made peace with it, and I'm very happy about it.
Okay, so hypothetically speaking, of course, you look at the UFC roster now. Is there anyone in the welterweight and middleweight divisions that you look at and think, I'd have loved to tested myself against them, I'd have loved to compete against the Adesanyas, the Pereiras, Leon Edwards, anyone like that you're looking at and think, I'd like to fight?
Well, when I was young, if I would go back 10 years ago, I would have loved to compete against the best fighter of today, but it's impossible. I would need a time machine and come back.
You're saying prime GSP against the current roster.
It's not only physical because I'm still in very good shape. It's more mental. I'm not the man that I used to be 10 years ago. When I was young, I was obsessed to be the best. I was in a different mindset. I was crazy. I was insane. I wanted to be able to get somewhere. I was able to step inside every door. And if a door was closed, I was going to open another one. And if the door were all closed, I was going to kick it out and get through by force. I was crazy. I'm not that same person anymore. I retired, and I retire with a smile. A lot of guys cannot say the same thing. They were forced to retire, but me, I retired because I wanted to. And I'm glad I did it. And I'm healthy, I'm happy, and I cannot ask for better life. But yeah, to go back, I would need a time machine. Not for rejuvenate me, not only physically, but also mentally. Because over time, you change. Your priorities change, and you change mentally. You're not the same person you were 10 years ago.
Final one from me before we open up to the fans for the Q&A. What would you say is the most complete performance of your career? The one that you're most proud of?
I think the best performance of my career, maybe when I fought my second fight against BJ Penn. I think that was my favorite of all because I had a very, very, very tough fight with BJ Penn the first time. That was probably the toughest fight of my career outside of the fight that I've lost, of course. But BJ Penn was probably the best fighter I've fought, pound for pound. And when I fought him the second time, I was very, very well prepared. I think that was the best performance of my career. And sometimes performance varies, and you don't really know why. You could train very hard, but the day of the fight, sometimes things just doesn't go the way you want, or things go very, very well. So you don't always know the reason why you have a better performance than others. Sometimes it just has to do with the days, you know, like you don't control that. You try to do the best you can, and the outcome take care of itself.